The world outside was pure white. Snow had been falling for 2 days straight, blanketing everything in a thick, silent layer. This cabin was my fortress. It stood at the very edge of town where the neat rows of houses gave way to the wild, untamed woods. The nearest neighbor was a good half-mile away, their house just a faint shape through the trees, a place I rarely saw any signs of life from. The isolation was the whole point. I needed a weekend away from the noise, from the city, from the constant pressure. Here, the only sound was the whisper of the wind weaving through the ancient pines and the soft crunch of my boots in the deep snow. It was a perfect escape. Survival is about finding a secure base. This cabin was it. Built from thick logs, it felt solid, a bastion against the harshness of the winter elements. Inside, a fire roared in the stone hearth, casting a warm orange glow across the wooden walls. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, a scent that felt clean and primal. I had stocked up on food and firewood, enough to last me well beyond the weekend. The plan was simple: read, relax, and recharge. The quiet was immense, a heavy blanket that settled over the landscape, muffling all sound. It was the kind of peace you can only find when you are truly alone, disconnected from the grid and surrounded by nature's raw power. The snow just kept coming down. It was beautiful but also intimidating. The sheer volume of it transformed the landscape, turning familiar shapes into strange white mounds. The road leading to the cabin had all but disappeared, and I knew no one would be coming or going until the plows made their way out here. This was true isolation. You have to be prepared for that. Mentally, you must accept that you are on your own. For me, that was a comforting thought. I felt self-reliant, capable. The cabin was my ship, and the snow was a vast, silent ocean. I was the captain, in complete control of my small, warm world. As the afternoon light began to fade, the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. The temperature dropped with the sun. I checked the doors and windows, a force of habit. Everything was secure. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine, untouched wilderness. The silence deepened, becoming almost a physical presence. It was just me in the woods. In these situations, you have to trust your instincts, but also stay rational. I felt calm, content. The world could do its worst, but inside my wooden shelter, I was safe. This was exactly what I'd been looking for. A break from the chaos of modern life. The cabin's best feature was also its most unnerving. The entire wall facing the forest was made of glass. Huge, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the snow-laden trees. During the day, it was magnificent. Sunlight streamed in, making the cozy interior feel bright and open. I could sit by the fire and watch the squirrels darting between branches, their dark fur a stark contrast against the white snow. It felt like being in a snow globe, a perfect, self-contained world where I was a silent observer. The glass was a barrier, but it was an invisible one, connecting me directly to the wildness outside while keeping me warm and safe. But when night fell, everything changed. The beautiful view became a black mirror. The warm, inviting light from inside the cabin reflected off the glass, turning the windows into dark, glossy surfaces. I could no longer see the forest. Instead, I saw a ghostly image of myself in the room behind me, superimposed over the inky blackness. The woods were still there, hidden just beyond the reflection, but now they felt different. They were a vast, unknown space, and the darkness seemed to press in against the glass, holding secrets I couldn't see. The feeling of being an observer was gone. Now, I felt exposed. The contrast was stark. Inside, everything was warm and familiar. The crackling fire, the soft glow of the lamp, the comfortable armchair. But just a few inches away, on the other side of that thin pane of glass, was a world of absolute darkness and freezing cold. The forest at night is a different animal. It comes alive with things that hide during the day. I tried to peer past my own reflection, to see into the deep shadows between the trees, but it was impossible. The darkness was a solid wall, and the window that had felt so open and freeing during the day, now felt like a vulnerability, a weak point in my fortress. I told myself it was just my imagination. You have to control your fear in a situation like this. Fear is the mind killer. But it was hard to shake the feeling of being on a brightly lit stage, with the entire forest as a potential audience. Every movement I made was reflected in the glass, a ghostly twin mimicking my actions. The cozy cabin suddenly felt like a fishbowl. The privacy I had craved now seemed like a dangerous illusion. The windows that were meant to bring the outside in were now just reminding me of how isolated I was, and how much was hidden in the night. I stayed up late, watching an old movie on my laptop. The volume was low, just enough to fill the silence without being jarring. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and the only other light came from the screen. The quiet of the house was absolute. It was past midnight. The movie's hero was in a tough spot, a classic survival scenario. I was completely absorbed in the story, my mind 1,000 miles away. Then I heard it. A sharp crack from outside. It wasn't the sound of a falling branch heavy with snow. This was different. It was a short, violent noise, like a thick branch being snapped deliberately. It cut through the silence like a knife. My head snapped up. I paused the movie. The silence that rushed back in was heavier than before. I held my breath, listening. Every nerve in my body was on high alert. Was it an animal? A deer, maybe? It was possible, but the sound had been so precise, so intentional. I strained my ears, waiting for another sound, but there was nothing. Only the faint, almost inaudible hum of the refrigerator. The fire shifted, sending a soft shower of sparks up the chimney, and I flinched. My heart was pounding in my chest. In the wild, any unexpected sound is a potential threat. You must investigate, but you must be cautious. Slowly, I got up from the chair and moved toward the large windows. The reflection was still there, a pale version of me moving through the dimly lit room. I cupped my hands around my eyes, pressing my face against the cold glass to block out the light from inside. I tried to peer into the darkness to see what had made the noise. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the landscape was a sea of shadows and faint gray shapes. For a moment, I saw nothing but the dark trunks of the trees, their branches heavy with snow. The forest was perfectly still. It was a picture of absolute peace. And then I saw it. A flicker of movement. It was fast, a shadow darting between two of the thickest pines at the edge of the woods. It was just a glimpse, so quick that I wasn't even sure I had really seen it. Was it an animal? A trick of the light? Or was it something else? My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but the feeling in my gut was undeniable. A cold wave of adrenaline washed over me. I felt a primal fear, the kind that tells you that you are no longer the predator, but the prey. The silence outside was no longer peaceful. It was watchful. The rest of that first night was a battle against my own mind. I backed away from the window slowly, my eyes still scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. I saw nothing. The forest remained still and silent, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It was a physical sensation, like a pressure on the back of my neck. I went to the front door and checked the lock. It was already bolted. I twisted it again just to be sure. I did the same with the back door. Every window latch was checked and rechecked. My fortress suddenly felt fragile, full of potential entry points. My rational mind was telling me I was overreacting, but my survival instincts were screaming at me to be on guard. Sleep was impossible. I turned off the lamp and lay down on the sofa, pulling a thick blanket over me. The fire had died completely, and the room was plunged into near total darkness. The only light was the faint gray glow of the snow-covered world outside the massive windows. I lay there, staring at the dark shapes of the trees, my ears straining to catch any sound. Every creak of the cabin settling, every whisper of wind, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I kept replaying the moment I saw the shadow. Was it a person? The thought was terrifying. Out here, so far from help, I was completely vulnerable. Survival is often a mental game. You have to stay calm. But fear is a powerful enemy. At one point I must have drifted off because I was startled awake by a sudden movement. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked toward the window and saw a figure standing there, looking in. For a terrifying second, I was paralyzed with fear. Then I realized what I was seeing. It was my own reflection, distorted and ghostly in the dark glass. I had shifted under the blanket, and my reflection had moved with me. A wave of relief washed over me. But it was quickly followed by embarrassment. I was letting my fear get the best of me. I was seeing threats where there were none, but even after that, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake for hours, my eyes fixed on the windows, my mind running through every possible scenario. What if the noise wasn't an animal? What if the shadow wasn't a trick of the light? The feeling of being watched never left me. It was a constant unnerving presence. As the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, I finally fell into a shallow, restless sleep, haunted by dreams of dark figures moving through a forest of white. The first night had been a test, and I wasn't sure if I had passed. The second day was strange. The sun came out, bright and brilliant, making the snow-covered landscape sparkle. In the clear light of day, my fears from the night before seemed foolish, just the product of an overactive imagination in the dark. I made breakfast, drank coffee, and tried to settle back into the peaceful mindset I had come here for. I even went for a short walk. Though honestly, the snow was so deep, it was exhausting. I scanned the area around the cabin, looking for any tracks, any sign that someone had been there. There was nothing but the smooth, unbroken blanket of snow. My own footprints from the day before were the only marks. It should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. A sense of unease lingered, a shadow that the bright sunlight couldn't chase away. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I looked up at the woods, I felt like a pair of eyes was on me from behind the trees. Sometimes I catch a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there, just the wind shaking snow from a branch. I kept glancing at the windows of the cabin from outside, half expecting to see a face looking back at me. The feeling was persistent, a low-grade hum of anxiety that buzzed just beneath the surface of my thoughts. I was on edge, my senses heightened. As evening approached, my anxiety grew. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the snow, and the woods began to look menacing again. I made sure the fire was burning brightly, trying to fill the cabin with as much light and warmth as possible. I decided to make an early dinner and try to get some proper sleep. I went into the small spare bedroom at the back of the cabin to grab an extra blanket. I distinctly remembered leaving the light on in that room earlier in the day, but when I pushed the door open, the room was dark. That's strange, I thought. I was sure I had left it on. I reached in and flipped the switch. The room was instantly flooded with light. I grabbed the blanket and turned to leave, flipping the switch off as I walked out. I took 2 steps down the short hallway when I heard a soft click behind me. I stopped. The light from the spare bedroom, which should have been off, was suddenly gone, plunging the hallway into shadow. My blood ran cold. I had just turned it off. I knew I had. There was no one else in the cabin. There was no logical explanation. The fear from the night before came rushing back, 10 times stronger. This wasn't in my head. Someone was inside the house with me. Panic is your worst enemy. It clouds your judgment. You have to fight it. But my heart was a drum beating against my ribs, and my breath came in short, ragged gasps. Someone was in the house. The thought was paralyzing. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening. I could hear nothing but the crackle of the fire and the frantic thumping of my own pulse in my ears. The spare bedroom door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness in the warm light of the living room. Was someone hiding in there, just feet away from me? Were they waiting for me to move? Every horror movie scenario I had ever seen flashed through my mind. My training kicked in. Assess the situation. Find an escape route. My phone and car keys were on the small table next to the armchair, by the large windows. I needed to get them and get out. The front door was my only way out. I began to back away slowly, my eyes locked on the bedroom door. My movements felt sluggish, as if I were moving through water, i.e. every creak of the floorboards under my feet sounded like a gunshot. The cozy cabin no longer felt like a shelter, it felt like a trap. I was an animal caught in a snare, and the hunter was somewhere in the shadows, watching, waiting. I reached the living room. The fire was still blazing cheerfully, a bizarre contrast to the cold terror that had gripped me. My keys and phone were right there, just as I had left them. I snatched them off the table, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped them. My plan was simple. Get the keys, run to the car, and drive. Don't look back. Just go. As I turned toward the front door, my gaze swept across the massive windows, and then I saw it. My heart stopped. There, in the deep snow just beyond the porch, were footprints, a clear set of tracks leading from the darkness of the woods directly toward the house. I stared at the footprints, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. They weren't mine. They were large, deep impressions from heavy boots, and then my eyes followed the tracks up from the snow to the window itself. A man was standing there. He was just on the other side of the glass, his face pale in the faint light from the fire. His eyes were dark, empty holes, and they were staring directly at me. He wasn't moving. He was just watching me, a silent, terrifying sentinel in the night. He had been there the whole time, watching my every move. The fear was absolute. He was outside, and someone else was inside. There was no time to think, only to act. Adrenaline surged through me, a primal instinct for survival taking over completely. The man at the window, the person in the house. I was trapped between them. I didn't scream. The sound was caught in my throat, a knot of pure terror. I fumbled with the car keys, my fingers feeling numb and clumsy. The front door was my only chance. I braced myself and ran. I burst out of the door and onto the small wooden porch, my boots slipping on a patch of ice. The cold air hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. I didn't look back at the window. I couldn't. I scrambled down the 3 steps and plunged into the deep snow. It was like running through thick mud, each step a monumental effort. My lungs burned. The car was parked about 50 feet away, a dark shape against the white snow. It felt like it was miles away. Then I heard it, a sound from behind me, the crunch of footsteps in the snow, fast and heavy. They were coming after me. I risked a glance over my shoulder. It was a mistake. The man from the window was moving now, loping through the snow with an unnatural speed. And he wasn't alone. Another figure had emerged from the side of the cabin, a dark silhouette against the snow. There were 2 of them. Panic gave me a fresh burst of speed. I clawed my way through the snow, my arms pumping, my legs churning. I could hear them getting closer. I could hear their breathing, harsh and ragged in the cold air. I reached the car and jammed the key into the lock, my hand shaking violently. The door clicked open. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut and hitting the lock button. I jammed the key into the ignition and twisted. The engine roared to life. In the glare of the headlights, I saw them. They were right there, just feet from the car. 2 men, their faces obscured by the darkness, their hands reaching for the door handle. I slammed the car into reverse, flooring the accelerator. The tires spun wildly in the snow, screaming for traction. For a terrifying second, the car didn't move. They were at the window, pounding on the glass. Then the tires caught. The car shot backward, fishtailing wildly. I wrenched the wheel, spinning the car around, and stomped on the gas. The car lurched forward, plowing through the deep snow on the driveway. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just drove, my foot pressed to the floor, my eyes fixed on the narrow path cut by my headlights. I didn't slow down until the lights of town were visible in the distance. When the police arrived at the cabin, they found a scene of chaos. They called me later, their voices grim. The place had been wrecked, furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and my belongings were scattered across the floor. But what was truly disturbing was what they found and what they didn't. Both the front and back doors were still locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry. The windows were all intact. They couldn't figure out how anyone had gotten in or out. The only evidence that anyone had been there at all were the 2 sets of footprints in the snow, leading from the woods and then away, disappearing back into the darkness. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. Did I know the men? Had I seen their faces clearly? I had nothing to give them. Just the image of a pale face with dark eyes and a second shadowy figure. The police report was inconclusive. A possible break-in, vandalism. But I knew it was more than that. The way they moved, the fact they were inside the house without breaking in, it wasn't normal. The footprints were the only tangible proof that my terror had been real, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. The officers told me I was lucky to have gotten away. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hunted. The nights are the worst now. Sleep offers no escape. The nightmares are relentless. I see the face at the window, the dark eyes staring at me through the glass. I relive the chase through the snow, the feeling of their hands just inches away. I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the silence of my room feeling just as menacing as the silence of the woods. I've moved since then, to a place in the middle of the city, surrounded by lights and noise and people, but it doesn't help. I still feel like I'm being watched. Every shadow in a dark alley, every reflection in a window, at night sends a jolt of fear through me. The experience left a scar on my soul, a deep and permanent mark. It shattered my sense of security. The world no longer feels safe, the police never found them. The case went cold. I am left with the terrifying uncertainty. Who were they? What did they want? And what would have happened if I hadn't run? These questions haunt me. I try to be rational, to move on, but the fear is a constant companion. It's a shadow that follows me everywhere, a reminder of that chilling night in the cabin and of the darkness that can hide just beyond the glass, watching and waiting.